We begin a special series tonight on one of Toronto's most valued services, Wheeltrans. Every day it helps hundreds of people get around, from the disabled to the elderly.
Well, the demand is so great that more than half of that service is contracted out to cab companies. Well, now some of those drivers say the demand on them is just too much.
Maribel True tells us the problems are now affecting the clients.
Thank you for this.
No problem, Spanish.
This is one of dozens of clients Haile Mebratu will pick up during his 12-hour shift today. It's what he does every day, 6 days a week. He has to. It's in the contract he signed with his cab company. So if you're not driving your car, you're not making money.
It's not only I'm not making money, I'm losing money. Because I have to pay my expenses.
Those expenses total about $4,000 a month just in car payments, insurance, and gas. Mebratu works for one of 3 taxi companies on contract with the TTC to provide accessible cab service. While he has no complaints about his company, he says the TTC schedule is almost impossible to keep up with. If drivers are late, they're dinged $30. Mebratu often eats in his cab and sometimes worse.
Sometimes you never know, I might miss it in my pants.
Other drivers CBC spoke to echo Mebratu's concerns, and they say it's the clients who also suffer.
I have been in complete shaking, like tears.
Ann Kennedy relies on accessible taxi service to get to and from work at the Canadian Paraplegic Association, Ontario.
I myself have been late by an hour and a half at times. And how do you explain that to your employer?
Kennedy isn't alone. She says many of her association's members have had similar experiences.
Lots of difficulties, people not getting to their destinations on time, people waiting for hours to get picked up.
Both drivers and clients agree changes need to be made.
I call it frustration. I'm done. I'm fed up with this thing.
And Maribel joins us live now in studio. Maribel, what's being done about these complaints?
Well, they've been taken to both the TTC and to City Hall, and that is through an advocacy group called iTaxiWorkers Association. They represent some of these accessible cab drivers. They say that the TTC pays these cab companies $80,000 each every month to do this supplemented service for Wheeltrans. I also spoke with City Councillor Denzel Min Wong. He's been a longtime advocate for taxi reform in this city. He says he has had major concerns with the contracts that these cab companies have with the TTC. I'll have much more on that, as well as the TTC's reaction as well tomorrow on CBC News Toronto.
Great series. Thanks, Maribel.
Thank you.
A lot of questions being raised about the state of TTC's Wheeltrans service, specifically the private cabs on contract to help the TTC deal with the huge demand for their services.
Maribel Taruk has the TTC's reaction tonight in part 2 of our series looking at the working conditions of accessible taxi drivers.
We told you about the concerns this accessible cab driver has over his working conditions yesterday.
I call it frustration. I'm done. I'm fed up.
Today, the group representing drivers like Mebratu says these conditions are unacceptable. Drivers are required to work at least 72 hours a week, most of the time without any breaks.
There doesn't seem to be anyone ensuring that their conditions of work and their ability to get from point A to point B safely is being addressed.
Faced with a growing demand, the TTC contracted out its Wheeltrans service to 3 cab companies in 2008. The drivers, in turn, signed contracts with the cab companies. The TTC says there are standards, but
our requirement is a maximum, limits them to 72 hours a week. So how they choose to do that is really up to the taxi company.
But Leibovich says the cab companies aren't complying with the terms of the contract. As an example, he says there are repeated complaints of accessible cabs driven by people who don't own them. And an internal letter to city officials says there is widespread non-compliance. But the TTC disagrees.
When it comes to owner-operator, the interpretation of the contract is different than it is with the taxi industry in general, and that has been accepted as valid.
As part of the contract, the TTC pays each taxi company $80,000 a month. For this city councillor, that money could be better spent.
And the millions of dollars that are being wasted could actually be reinvested in the vehicles and in the system.
The contract with the cab companies expires in 2 years. The TTC has not committed to renewing it. In fact, it says it's exploring all options. To raise further awareness of their working conditions, the drivers' advocacy group has invited TTC and city officials to an open discussion at the end of the month. Maribel Tarouk, CBC News, Toronto.
An update for you now on a CBC News exclusive. This week we told you about growing concerns about the costs and safety of the Wheel-Trans service. Today, drivers got their first chance to air their worries, and our Evie Cuervo was there.
I get paid from here until I get there.
After 12 years of working as a cab driver in Toronto, Yitbarak Gebremariam is at his wit's end.
I collect this all fares for TTC, and they don't give me anything back.
It's a story many at this roundtable for Wheel-Trans accessible taxi drivers share, and they're not the only ones complaining.
The end user is also paying more than the rest of the general public.
He says he pays $30 each way for Wheel-Trans, and the service is not always reliable. In 2008, the TTC contracted the service out to 3 cab companies, and this advocate worries increasing demand is putting lives at risk.
Nobody wants their mom or dad or their loved one being driven around by a driver who really doesn't have the time to take a shower or go to the bathroom or has no breaks.
He wants the existing contracts between the TTC and the cab companies cancelled. He'll make that case tomorrow when he meets with the head of Wheel-Trans. Evie Cuervo, CBC News, Toronto.